Thank you for joining us, Rajesh. And thanks, Nikhil, for setting the tone and declaring that you need to be wary of people like Paytm and others. So we have about 25 minutes with Rajesh, who is the co-founder and CEO of Make My Trip. And for those of you that are not familiar with Make My Trip, they are the largest and only publicly listed OTA out of India. They're listed on NASDAQ, and in their own words, are an internet technology company that just happens to be in the travel business. Make My Trip is largely focused on the Indian traveler, which is a key feeder for Thailand hotels. And just to give you a perspective of how big they are, about 100,000 room nights are booked on Make My Trip on a daily basis. So Rajesh, I want to start off with a very simple question. Mm-hmm. Can hotel booking channels and OTAs coexist?
Well, surprise, surprise. Good afternoon, everyone. Nikhil really set the stage for this session, and I was sitting the backstage there, and I was thinking, I'll have to now, on the fly, think of what I want to share with the audience today. So let's see how it goes. This question obviously has been around for many years. So let me just share my perspective with you all. It's been, we've been in this business now for good about 17 years, which is the online travel business. We started our company back in 2000 in India. First 5 years, nothing was happening. We were early stage. So I think it'll be fair to say that there's been an experience of about 12 years in this space. And the many other international OTAs, that in the previous discussion that you heard, they have been existing for many more years as well. The way we think about it is, I think there is space for both to coexist, and coexist in a nice way. Coexist in a nice way, more in a partnership and a win-win situation, rather than thinking that, we are competing with each other, if you will. And the reason why I say that is for actually a couple of reasons. One, there is always, an argument around core versus non-core. So for us, excuse me, for us, the way we think about it, as Megha said in the beginning, and we truly believe so, is that we are actually into technology business. We are experts in internet technologies. Internet technologies moved from one space to mobile technologies. So we've also transitioned into that. Potentially, it'll move to some other technology. We will probably transition into that. And happens to be in the travel business, trying to connect, solve customers' problems, people who are looking for travel needs on one hand, and also trying to actually solve for a lot of the supply side problems as well. And as we go into the discussion, I'll give you a few examples of that as well. And somewhere sitting in the middle with the core competency around the distribution platform. And that's precisely what we are at this point in time. And I don't think you would see any other sector, and not only hospitality sector, just take your mind, probably look at any sector, any industry for that matter, and you would find that I don't think there is any one sector you would find that could perhaps build the business completely on their own in terms of distribution channels or distribution strategy for any sector and in business. I think they have partners, they have distribution partners, they have their direct channels, and both have been coexisting for so many years. And I do think that can exist. So, the core versus non-core argument is that, in the hotel business, since morning you've been listening to actually very good thoughts in the previous two presentations. There's a lot more that you could potentially do in providing the in-stay experience, just from an hospitality standpoint, and there's enough disruption that's coming that way as we go along. We'll talk more about that. And in our core business and core competency businesses, just from a distribution standpoint, try and see how much more can we potentially do to make sure that the sheer booking experience is very, very convenient, is very, very personalized potentially, and maybe powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning tomorrow, and so on. And we'll continue to keep focusing on that. And the second argument, which is again debated, I don't think I would have probably attended any conference where it would not be debated, not only the hospitality conference, but even the internet conferences and so on. And that's the P&L argument. And the P&L argument is always, what's the cost of distribution on this channel, what's the cost of distribution on the other channel. And maybe I can give you an example of another sector which we are very well into, is the airline sector in India. And I think it's a fairly evolved sector in terms of just figuring out between the OTAs and the airline sector a model that kind of works for both. And maybe it was a late mover advantage and so on. And there is an economic model that exists which kind of works for them and which kind of works for OTAs as well. And similarly, I think there could be, again, a very solid, very long-term sustainable partnership approach that could be taken to ensure that both parties kind of figure out a solution which is more win-win from the P&L management standpoint. At the end of the day, everyone has to run its own business, and those are very, very important things to do. And that's the kind of approach that we take. So I think these are the two core arguments that I think there's space for everyone. And if we start kind of looking at it from that perspective, I think there could be a very, very long sustained partnership between OTAs and hoteliers, not only hoteliers, maybe the other suppliers as well.
So you touched upon the airline segment, and I know when you had your IPO in 2010, about 85% of your business was coming from airlines, and today it's probably less than 50%. Over the years, Make My Trip has also been very vocal about spending a lot of, doing a lot of R&D and investing a lot of dollars in actually opening up the hotel online booking market, which is finally now starting to happen the last 2-3 years. Why do you think it took so long for this segment to open up? And what do you think have been the driving forces for this shift?
Sure, no, it's a great question, and that's exactly what our business was back in 2010. And today we have 54% of our business coming from hotel and packages bookings rather than air booking. And it's not to say that actually air business has not grown. Hotel business has outgrown the air business. In fact, on the domestic air business, we actually have 1 out of 4 bookings in the domestic air market, which happen on our platform. So it's about 25% market share on the booking of the airspace. But in terms of why it took a lot of time to open up the hotel market, there were 1 or 2 big reasons for that, and after that it has only been going in one direction. And that was, see, if you really see the 2 products and the buying behavior of consumers on the 2 products, largely consumers would know what to expect on the other side when it comes to the flight product. I mean, there are a handful of airlines, and there are a couple of models with the low-cost carrier model and a full-service carrier model. So you know what to expect on the other side. So it kind of becomes an easier decision, and it's a very straightforward, presentation of information, presentation of selection and choice, and making sure that just the booking behavior is very fast and convenient for anyone. And that was the kind of pain area if you really compare it with the traditional and conventional way of booking either the air transport or the rail transport or bus transport for that matter. So it was very easy to bring that on internet. It was very easy because the bandwidth that was required was not really rich. Even you could do it on a narrowband kind of a transaction. And digital ecosystem in India had not really grown. It has only grown significantly just from a broadband and high quality bandwidth standpoint only the last 5 or 6 years. We never used to have. I remember in 2010, the internet users used to be 120 million, but broadband users used to be, believe it or not, about 10 million, right? So it's just used to be abysmally low, which is what you need, because you need high quality bandwidth, because for hotel buying, the behavior is that you actually, given the fragmented market space in India, and I'm sure you all know the landscape of hotel supply side in India is very, very fragmented. It's highly fragmented, quite like more like Europe than US, and maybe more like China as well. So in that space, what you need to do to be able to early days on desktop and now on mobile, the tiny screen, to be able to give you everything from a content perspective, whether it is a user-generated content or it is a curated pictures content, or to give the description of the hotel and many other things. A fairly involved product because at the end of the day, it's more an experience and a stay experience. And when you talk about leisure, it becomes even more complex and so on. So when you have to do all of that, you need, at a very core level, you need high quality bandwidth. And that change happened with the mobile ecosystem developing. So mobile ecosystem brought two things. One, it brought high quality bandwidth, and then it brought 24/7 smartphone, which was handy. As Nikhil was talking about how the growth of the mobile ecosystem happened. So it kind of gave us an opportunity to open it up. So from a macro standpoint, these were the two big drivers, if you ask me.
But is it only the increasing mobile penetration, or is it also the so-called China syndrome of heavy discounting and large cashbacks that have sort of incentivized, all of these customer acquisition?
Sure. And am I surprised on this question as well? So no. So I say there are two aspects to it, Megha. If I may just share my perspective on that. So one aspect is, at a very fundamental level, how do you solve leveraging technology, the presentation part of it? How do you solve leveraging technology to bring the supply online? And that's very core to solving this problem, right? Mm-hmm. Which is doing a heavy lifting on the technology side, making sure that the platform is robust enough, has the product offering, and coming in from the supply. So a lot of the investment actually goes behind it. And early days, huge amount of investments went behind that. When it comes to then pushing for adoption, so any technology, when you push for adoption, you have to make investments. And that is when pricing levers are typically used in the internet business, which is, and it's not necessarily only in the hotel space. Back in the days, it was also in the flight space. You look at Amazon, you look at Flipkart, you look at e-commerce space, you look at food space, you look at any internet businesses around. When you have to push the adoption, you kind of go very, very aggressive on the back of two things. One is just presenting and creating education and creating awareness around how convenient, how transparent, how quick your system is in solving the real pain problem. And people realize that when they kind of do it once. And then, trying to use the price lever to just kind of have the multiplier or the force multiplier impact of that. That's what you end up doing. And you could blame China for that this virus came from China and we kind of got into it. But at the end of the day, I can tell you this much out of the experience, that the method, of kind of opening up the market perhaps can be debated, whether it was a pricing lever or anything else that could have been used. But the amount or the quantum of investment that was required to open up the market was this much. I don't think we could have been able to open up the market without making these kind of investments.
So in line with the theme of the conference, what are some of the innovations that you are seeing in hospitality? I know Nikhil touched upon a few new technologies and new hotel brands that are embracing these. What are some of them that you see in hotels and also in the travel space?
Yeah, sure. I don't think fundamentally any business, especially our businesses, and that's the kind of philosophy that we follow. And I think it's important to kind of probably follow maybe for every technology-led business. And dare I say, actually non-technology-led businesses, because disruption is very fundamental and it keeps you on your toes. And every business, and I can give you examples where every business potentially is kind of getting disrupted. So I think it's, Nikhil's last slide, that we should keep our ears and eyes open. And be on our feet in terms of just embracing new technologies and new potential disruption areas, and be ready to be able to kind of then deal with it. But with respect to our business, specific to the booking experience, there are plenty of innovations that we've done. You heard Nikhil saying about the chatbot experience. he was giving an example of hotel booking on using Alexa or Siri. We've actually launched, on one of our brands for a budget users to start with, because we thought that the voice input from the user, which is not necessarily having a expensive smartphone, actually having a very light smartphone, and we wanted to go deep India, and therefore the regional languages also become important. And they're not necessarily, they're very familiar Indian audiences about chatting, texting, but a lot of the symbols there, not necessarily English, but also very, very kind of comfortable speaking about it. So we worked on that insight, and we've already launched an app which is like a 1.5 MB size, very light on your phone, because the device that we thought that it should go on was just a very simple, basic 1.0 kind of a smartphone device, and where the whole flow is taking voice input. And we do believe that the e-commerce potentially is going to actually change with this voice input technology. And it's non-trivial, by the way, at the back end, how you kind of, what is the kind of work that goes into it. And this has two kind of aspects to it. So one is just taking voice as an input, and two is the natural language processor, which is like a big deal from a technology standpoint, which could, just read your regional language, and we've launched it in Hindi to start with, and also in English, and we want to expand it to all the regional languages. So think about any local language, like in Thailand or in Bangkok. Local language is very, very popular. A lot of people actually converse in local language. Can we potentially, or Mandarin for that matter, in China? I'm sure you all know that a lot of the chatting business that happens is actually local language. It's not English. So rather than just texting, can we take voice input as an input and render the same kind of results that you would want from a hotel booking perspective or a flight booking perspective? We've launched that, so that's kind of one innovation. I do believe it's going to, in the next few years, this is going to be one of the big trends that would emerge in terms of just making it much more convenient, even for the high-end users, where I'm sure, back home, we've been using, and I've seen millennials using Alexa and Siri and giving instructions to listen to the music and do various other things. And I don't know if you guys have got a chance to look at the recent Google presentation. Sundar Pichai presented just last week in the US, where you could actually book, the hair salon appointment using the voice input. On the back of it is all artificial intelligence. The other person doesn't even know that he's talking to computer or she's talking to computer or the human interface or not. So, so leveraging that technology, we've actually launched this. That's one. Then the second innovation that I can talk about, it's going to be very different. It's not going to be very, the booking experience, some of the old 2006, 2007 slides that you saw, and now 2017 are very, very different. I believe 2020 you would see completely different as well. And that would be very personalized. And if you go on Make My Trip today, and if you are an existing customer, we actually know your profile. We know what kind of selection in the past of the hotels that you've chosen, what are the kind of sectors that you fly, which are the kind of products and activities that you would have perhaps bought in. And we have all of that data. And the bedrock for all of these, by the way, tech innovations is data science. So we have a team which kind of simulates all this data. We use machine learning on top of it, and powered by artificial intelligence, and present the results when you come next to our platform, which means that the person A with a different profile would completely see a personalized screen tomorrow, and a person B will see a completely different screen in terms of making it very, very personalized. And then it is an intelligent system. It learns from every visit that you would make on our platform. So it's going to be a very personalized world. We talk about in hospitality sector. I was in another conference. I was talking to Megha earlier, alumni Oberoi's conference, and a lot of people were talking about hospitality like especially five-star category of hotels, the human touch is extremely important and so on and so forth. And you've already heard some examples in the earlier discussions. Citizen M is a great example. Where is the human touch in the check-in experience? I personally experienced it. We got to know about it in one of our roadshow trips. We actually checked in. I can tell you it's a wonderful experience, check-in experience. It's only a kiosk experience. There's no human touch there. It's so efficient, so quick, and you can just simply get in there. Andaz, somebody gave an example. It's a great experience, just a refreshing experience. We are actually working on an experiment in one of our hotel partners in India to provide seamless check-in, and it's a chain hotel. It's a mid-sized chain hotel, and they're also very forward-looking and ready to embrace that kind of technology as well. So there are a bunch of innovations that we keep trying. The point really is that I think there are two key success factors to every business. One is, and one of them is innovation and constantly thinking of. And maybe the fear factor should come from that you might get disrupted. There is somebody out there who's ready to actually challenge the status quo, and therefore disruption, don't think it always comes only in technology. Disruption can come in your supply side. Disruption is clearly Airbnb, alternative accommodations, clear disruption. Uber is a great example of supply side disruption on the transport side, for example. Right? I mean, the technology has enabled them to do it, but the real disruption is on the supply side, right? So I think that if we continuously keep thinking about how do we challenge the status quo, how do we at very core level continue to keep thinking about improving customer experience, we would be in business. Otherwise, I'm afraid the world is moving at a pace and very soon there will be a situation where we might get disrupted quite badly. At least in our business, we think it like that.
You touched upon alternate accommodation, and somebody earlier mentioned that, Airbnb should probably look at becoming a booking channel. So I want to ask you, is Airbnb or a platform like theirs really a threat to hotel companies, or is it really a threat to you?
I think it would be for both. So Airbnb essentially is obviously aggregating hotel properties, and as you're aggregating alternative accommodations, apartments, etc., that's how they started. But as they expand, they're already talking about aggregating of hotels. They're already actually talking about becoming maybe full-fledged OTA at some point in time. So I think it's just a question of, what's your business model? What are your strategies? How do you want to expand it? And it will evolve over a period of time. So from our point of view, the way we think about it is whether it is tomorrow horizontal or a vertical, if there is anyone who's trying to be an intermediary distribution platform, we need to watch them very, very carefully. Whether they start with, Booking.com today is only a hotel company, but Priceline was a flight aggregator in the past as well. But who knows, potentially they're already thinking about, in fact, there are clear talks, and not only rumors and talks, there is, they have actually gone on record to talk about it as well. So I think that's how we should, in our own minds map from a competition standpoint. From a hospitality industry standpoint, I think across the category, I think it's a serious competition. In the other conference that I was referring to, there were a few people saying no necessarily, maybe not, maybe it might not touch the higher category of hotels, higher segment of hotels. I think they were in denial mode. I think if we think that they are not going to touch and get into luxury villas, they already are. They already have, by the way, and we have a lot of customers who actually have started to prefer that. We have our colleagues in our offices, including some of the leadership team members, have experienced that product themselves and loved it. So to start to think that, listen, it's not going to be our competition, and therefore we should continue to keep sitting in the comfort zone. I think we'll be making a big mistake.
Okay, we just have under a minute left, so I want to wrap up by asking you, your strategy for Thailand. I know it's your number one market in Southeast Asia. What is your inbound and outbound strategy for Thailand, and what are the markets that you're looking at within the country?
Sure. No. So outbound from India, I mean, we are India focused at this point in time for sure because we see a lot of potential. So we operate in domestic travel within India, of course, travel as well as the accommodation space. We want to actually be the place, one-stop shop for servicing every travel need of Indian consumer, and that also includes outbound. And outbound specifically has a lot of headroom, has a lot of potential for two big reasons. One, at a macro level, I'm sure all of you or most of you would know that India is definitely growing really rapidly, great GDP growth, great disposable income growth, and people are very aspirational. And look at the outbound travelers growth out of India. You would realize that it's kind of growing actually double-digit for the last few years, and the size is becoming bigger and bigger. So huge amount of potential. We think that from an online booking market perspective, there are few segments which have reached, which is the domestic civil aviation market, which has reached certain level of maturity, but there are many other segments. So the accommodation market, which is domestic hotels, international hotel bookings, international flights bookings, international packages. So all the outbound segments, there is tremendous amount of headroom, not necessarily from an offline to online shift, which is our core business, but overall market is growing as well. And if you look at it, the supply side, the fleet expansion, when you talk to the airlines, each carrier is actually adding more and more planes. I was in Singapore yesterday meeting some of the top airlines from the region, and they have mega plans as well. So from our point of view, a very core part of our strategy is actually 5-hour, 6-hour flying distance, because that's the first port of call for Indian consumers when they think of going abroad. And then, the long haul comes into the picture, whether it's Europe or Australia, New Zealand, and then eventually US. But this 5-hour, 6-hour Southeast Asia region, Middle East, Maldives, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, this is really core and a lot of growth headroom there. And we've made investments. We've actually have our own destination management company presence. We acquired that long time back, right after IPO, both in Singapore as well as Bangkok. We have our own core hotel contracting team based out of various cities. We've kind of looked at about 15 core cities where Indians travel. We are investing behind those cities of building supply side from our point of view. So super critical region from our point of view, and this segment, which is the outbound segment, from our strategy standpoint.
Super. Great. Thank you for joining us,
Thanks.
Rajesh. And guys, warm thank you for Rakesh, please.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for
Thanks.
joining us.
Thank you, guys.